Today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of extension as a whole and the history of agriculture. Now, there's a lot of things we could get into. We could spend hours talking about the history of agriculture and where we are now, but we're going to take somewhat of a broad scope perspective on types of equipment or concepts that were present in agriculture maybe 50, 60 years ago, and how far we've come today. We're going to take a little bit of a current view as well. Just because we know that there are so many advances that have happened so quickly that we may be aware of as agricultural producers, but general public or some of our consumers may be really surprised to learn that we use. So before we get too far into it, a land grant university. That's something that not everyone is familiar with the term. So OSU, or the Ohio State University, is the state of Ohio's land grant university, 1890 land grant university. Each state across the nation has a land grant university, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what that means, but it does make us somewhat special because one of our first focus areas as a college and a university was agriculture. So without further ado,
State University Extension is part of a long and storied national history. Extension is an educational partnership between the United States Department of Agriculture and the nation's land-grant universities. The Morrill Act of 1862 set up the land-grant university system across the country. It was signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln. The sale proceeds of land given to each state by the federal government were used to start land-grant colleges. The Ohio State University is a land-grant university and the home of OSU Extension. In 1914, the Smith-Lever Act established the Cooperative Extension Service, a nationwide system of community-based education. President Woodrow Wilson signed the act, which created outreach programs through the land-grant universities to educate rural Americans about advances in agriculture. So what is Extension today? Extension is real. It's personal. It's people. It's ideas. And it's opportunity. It's a belief that things done with you, by you, and for you will make a lifelong impact on you and your family, your friends, and your community. OSU Extension provides community-based outreach from the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences at The Ohio State University. And we have an Extension office in each of our 88 counties. Extension is your link to Ohio State no matter where you live. We extend the resources of Ohio State directly to you, and our campus is statewide. Our clients live in suburban, rural, and urban locations, and they are young, older, or somewhere in between. OSU Extension believes that all Ohioans have the knowledge and resources they need to actively engage in creating conditions in which they thrive. We use expertise in agriculture and natural resources, 4-H youth development, family and consumer sciences, and community development to focus on several current priorities. With our clients, we proactively address issues, tackle challenges, and encourage others to move forward in positive ways. Our professionals and our clients together create programs, materials, and experiences that help all of us build better lives, better businesses, and better communities. OSU Extension. We create opportunities for people to explore how science-based knowledge can improve social, economic, and environmental conditions. Visit the link on screen to find the contact information for the Extension office in your county. Start now and add your own chapter to the Extension story.
Extension is essentially what we sometimes term as boots on the ground or the front porch to the university. We are university employees. We do go down to Columbus every now and then for meetings and in-services and to make sure we're getting the most up-to-date trainings, but by and large, we're in the community in county in each of our 88 counties. Not every county across Ohio has representatives in all 4 program areas. Sometimes we work collaboratively among county groups or our districts or areas, and that's how we make sure we're serving the community at a larger scale. But this breaks it down into more of a timeline. 1862, we talked about that Morrill Act, is when kind of the premise of the land-grant university started. That's when OSU was thought of. That's when we came to life, as it were. Hatch Act, this is another important one that wasn't necessarily mentioned in the video. So the Hatch Act, or Hatch Act dollars and research grants, research funds, established farms to supplement those land-grant universities. So if you go down to Columbus, even if you go to ATI in Worcester, there are working, functioning farms that give our students the opportunity to learn on farm with that practical, hands-on application. That's also where we conduct some research as well, because it's a research farm, it's a learning farm. That's where some of that practical learning happens. It gives our students and our faculty a chance to try things out in real life, see how relevant, applicable it is, and it also gives us the chance to accelerate some of those practices, or say animal health, crop related, specialty crops, anything that we're curious about, we can implement on farm. 1890, these, if you've heard of Central State University, Central State is Ohio's 1890 land grant university, so we do have 2 land grants in Ohio, and we do collaborate. The Smith-Lever Act in 1914 established the Cooperative Extension Service. So if you saw the logo that popped up right before I shut it off, that was our old logo, the Cooperative Extension Service. We've since grown and morphed into what we see today. But we've been here since 1914 and have no intention of going anywhere. So extension has changed. What extension looks like has changed since the early 1900s, but we've collectively kept the same goal of educating Ohioans. So extension, there was little red dots in each county where our county offices are located, but we really do try to serve a statewide approach. Even though, say for myself or other ag and natural resources educators in each county, we may be county-based, but we collaborate, and so do our 4-H educators, our family and consumer science educators, and our community development educators. So we're all on several statewide teams to make sure that, okay, this is going on in Northeast Ohio, is it going on in Southwest Ohio as well? Cool, what are you learning? How can we address it, and how can we work together? That happens on a very broad scale on a lot of different topics. So we're constantly learning and trying to see what's coming next, and what should we be preparing ourselves and our communities for. Now, you did ask a little bit about what are the expectations of an ag and natural resources educator today. So this little graphic shows a little bit about the topics that we tend to focus or funnel our research or our programming into. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, so there may be some on here that we can pull out and think of that aren't listed, and there may be some things listed here that we don't focus on 100% of the time every year. They kind of pop up more seasonally. But to summarize it for you, we've got ag safety and health. Think of our ag safety and health folks, okay? When do we hear about ag safety?
On the news.
When something goes wrong, right? Okay, so our ag safety and health team meets monthly. We try to collaborate and make sure we're getting preparedness information out. So just recently, some heat stress articles, some information and resources on how to identify signs of heat stress, things like that. There's also a lot of equipment safety, tractor, machinery service, operators, skills that get incorporated into that group. Our fruit and vegetable crops. We're really fortunate in Northeast Ohio, especially in Columbiana and Mahoning counties, to have the number of specialty crop producers that we do. We have a wide variety of specialty crops. Specialty crops would be like our fruit and vegetables. Any specialty products such as, we were just talking to a farm that works with lavender. So things like that are not necessarily large-scale row crops, but still supplement the community and still an agricultural product.
In our counties, in Columbiana,
Yeah.
Preston planted lavender.
Yeah,
Oh, awesome.
It lasted for a little bit. But
It's a trial and error species, so so don't give up on it. It might still be hope there. Livestock and dairy, we're very livestock heavy, dairy heavy in Columbiana County as well. In the state of Ohio, Columbiana County ranks in the top 5 typically for number of head of dairy cattle. We're very close to that with number of head of beef cattle as well. But if you look at the state where Northeast Ohio is, and say maybe our flat neighbors out to the west, Western Ohio, we don't have those large open spanses of fields that maybe Western Ohio does, but we're more adapt to graze livestock. So we have a lot of livestock and dairy in this area. Farm markets and direct marketers. So direct marketers are folks that sell products straight off the farm, maybe meat, milk, eggs, produce straight off the farm. And then we also work hand in hand with our farm markets and our farmers markets. Agronomic crops is when we get into that corn, soybeans, wheat. Okay, so larger scale row crops. We have a variety of small and large farms and medium-sized farms in this area, all of them working together to make what we produce here viable. The green industry, or home, yard, and garden, so our commercial landscapers, think about our greenhouses, all very, very important pieces of the ag puzzle in Northeast Ohio. Now, farm office, okay? A lot of times people are like, the farm office, what is that? So that's where we get into farm business management, farm and ag law, things like that really help our farm families thrive and stay successful in the business and management mind frame. Because as much as we would all love to go out and farm without thinking about the numbers, we have to think about the numbers because that's what allows us to keep farming. Digital ag, we're going to get a little more into this towards the end of the program today. But digital ag, if you would have looked at this maybe 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been a square on here. We just said, oh sure, digital, that'll happen someday. Well, we're full into it now, very much so, and we'll talk more about that. New and small farms. We have a whole team dedicated to this. Folks that call and say, I want to start farming. That's a big goal, right? So we have a whole host of resources and folks that are kind of specialized in helping people walk through this conversation, the types of considerations they need to be making for what type of farm, what enterprise do they want to be into, what is their end marketing goal. Helps them navigate those conversations and look through the resources that are available to them. Because we obviously want to encourage new farm business managers, but we want to make sure people have the tools to be successful at it. Natural resources, okay? So when I pulled in here, I saw the tree farm sign. So obviously you guys are taking natural resources seriously. Natural resource management, we have a lot of experts and researchers devoted to making sure we're farming, we're managing our land, and we're conserving in a very strategic and responsible way. This kind of ties in very well with the nutrient management and water quality. So we have some water quality associates that work with us throughout the state. This ties into nutrient management because we want to be making sure that we're very judicious with our use of any nutrients that we're adding onto our fields or in our crops. One, because we want to make sure we're not spending too much or using what we don't need, but also to make sure that we're being sustainable and keeping our land use and chemical and nutrient use practical. Urban ag, so maybe not as much right here, but think just a little further north once we get past Canfield into our more urban populations. So urban agriculture is a growing business. We work with several producers in urban situated environments, and they've really made it work for them, whether it's through a community garden aspect or through education. Pesticide and fertilizer applicators. So OSU Extension is somewhat of a partner with the Ohio Department of Agriculture for pesticide applicator licensing. So we are the recertification body that educates our pesticide license holders every year. Well, we hold classes every year. Our license holders recertify with us every 3 years. And we ensure that they're up to date on pesticide regulations and applicating information, law updates, anything like that. and we work hand in hand with those growers very frequently. So this is a nutshell. Probably didn't feel like a nutshell, but this is a nutshell version of what program areas Ag and Natural Resources touch on. Now that's just Ag and Natural Resources, so that's a quarter of the extension puzzle. 4-H, FCS, and Community Development all have their own specialized focus areas as well. So we really do try and reach, I know one of the topic areas was across the lifespan. We try to reach everyone from birth to our elderly population and making sure we're touching them where they need us. So the world of ag, we're going to get into a little bit of where did we start and where are we headed, because it's not where we end. We're not done by any means. We're continually growing every day, every year. So I am not going to read through every bullet point on here, okay? But this is a really condensed version of, or condensed history of American agriculture from 1776 up to 1999. Okay, so some of the things that we see on there, what stands out to you? And it might just be the photos. Any photos stand out to you?
Hard water, it's like a pretty big invention.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was like in the 70s.
I think that plow, is that a plow? The third picture.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? I see the food pyramid on there. What do you see on the first slide there? The cotton gin. Okay, so the cotton gin, a lot of times we refer to as like, wow, this was one of the first like novel pieces of mechanics or equipment that really got us thinking like, okay, we can do this more efficiently. What else can we do more efficiently? So 1794 was the invention of the cotton gin with Eli Whitney. We think of that as, that really spurred us on to thinking about what we could make more efficient. Led us not too far later into the first tractor, which doesn't look all that different than some of the tractors we think of today, right? The first tractor was built in 1892. It was initially unsuccessful, like most inventions are, right? Takes a time or two. He eventually built the Waterloo models LA and R in 1914 and then sold the company to what we now know as John Deere. Okay, so he didn't make a bad business decision there. Obviously, his start is now something that we use on farm every day on a very widespread scale.
Same colors too.
Yep. Mm-hmm. That has not changed. Some of the crop equipment we use now. Okay, think drones. Drones are growing in popularity. They're growing in usage. We can use those for pest pressure and disease monitoring. So if we're looking across a, say, 400-acre field, is it practical for us to walk that entire 400 acres to be scouting for pest or disease pressure? I mean, you could if you had a lot of time on your hands and could do it regularly, but likely not. Drones can help us map out fields much quicker and more efficiently and identify different disease-causing agents or pests potentially, so we can catch them before they cause a widespread problem.
So does OSU use those drones?
Mm-hmm.
Or are the farmers using
Both.
those?
Now there's different, say, co-ops that have contracts with drone operators that can be helpful. This isn't to say that every farm owns a drone,
Right.
but there's more services available now, say, than even 5-10 years ago, to let a drone be used on property.
And it can detect the pests and disease. It can get that close to it.
It can get close. There's also a lot of science and technology in helping with some of that smart aspect where we can be watching on the screen to see what's going on, so that we can see a more broad spectrum view of the field. The other piece that we're going to spend a little bit of time on is precision technology. So when I say precision technology, that means we're adding in fine-tuning details to different steps in the cropping process, whether that's through GPS field mapping or grid mapping. And you may say, what is field or grid mapping? Which we're going to get into, but if you see that picture there, we can see a little bit of a preview of what we're looking at in the cab. Now, are all of our tractors equipped with GPS technology? No, but it's an option and it's more available now than it ever has been. A little bit more on precision management. So the Ohio State University Extension Ag and Natural Resources program as a whole has some researchers that are specifically tied into our precision ag team or precision management. We're looking at things like precision seeding, crop management, harvest technologies, apps for agriculture, some data analysis and management. Now this is big, especially for on-farm use. The data analysis gives our farms tangible research and tangible information that they can use to improve their crops for the next year or improve their field health.
And that would be done like at the university level?
Some of it can be, but that's something that a lot of farms also work with their, say, their agronomist or their crop advisor. Some are able to pull this up through data they have in equipment on farm. So there's a wide range of availability. We asked farms, this was a couple years ago, what is your motivation to use or plan to use precision farming technologies over the next 3 years? The primary motivator was reduction in input cost. Okay, they may say, well, it's more expensive to get equipment with this technology. How would it reduce my input costs? Well, we'll look at it in a minute. Think of that field mapping and grid mapping. If we know exactly in the field where we have higher, say, phosphorus levels already, we can turn the nutrient application on and off based on, or lever it based on crop need throughout the field. We're using less overall, potentially using less overall, reducing our input cost, reducing that overall expense to the farm. And we're being much more efficient with the nutrients we're using. That's just one example out of many, but input cost reduction was a key driver, higher profitability as well, trying to maximize yield. Better understanding of field variability. This was another commonly spoken reason from our farms. And who wouldn't want to know more information about their fields to make better decisions, right? A lot of fields can vary, especially think if it's a newly acquired field or a field that you're renting for the first time that you really haven't had much history with. Having the ability to break it down on a grid basis gives us way more information than we used to have. Some others here listed, I won't read through all of them, but a lot of these make sense when we're thinking about crop management and overall farm management. How can we be more efficient, okay? So GPS technology is something we see used very commonly in these systems. The GPS technology itself is not that much different than other GPS technologies we're more familiar with. It's just using it with a tractor or farm equipment rather than our car. This one I love to bring up because it's fun. Okay, so this script Ohio, this is using prescription planting. So that's a field of corn there, and you see how we have one variety.
Oh, that's plants. Those are plants.
That's a planted field, okay? And the variety that is yellowing faster was planted in a script Ohio pattern using prescriptive planting.
Interesting.
Okay, it was going to yellow faster.
But
Yep.
I've never thought that that's how it was created.
Yep, so that's using prescription seeding, okay? So we're specifically planting a certain variety in a certain pattern. So while the tractor's making a pass, the tractor's not going in a script Ohio movement. They're still going back and forth, but the seeder knows exactly which type of seed to plant after we've mapped out the field. So that one's kind of fun. I like the script Ohio. And who else can say they have a script Ohio in their field, right? So on screen though, if we're using precision planting, and different technologies or different brands may look a little different, this is just an overall general view. We're looking at everything from seed population to the singulation, if there's appropriate spacing between seeds, the speed, overall acreage. We're looking at a lot of little tiny details that make up a good corn crop or a good bean or wheat or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of science that goes into that. We're way past the throw it on the field and hope it sticks stage. This also carries through into harvest. So yield monitoring, we're looking at different sensors and receivers on our equipment that tells us exactly the yield levels we're seeing. So the picture, I know it's a little blurry up in the corner, but we can be looking in the field to see exactly where we're seeing higher yields and lower yields as we're harvesting, okay? As that corn is going in, we're able to see, okay, yep, I thought this was gonna be a little lower area or a lower average area. And then we can take it down, dissect it a little bit and say, okay, why did we see lower yields in this part of the field? Or why did we see higher yields in this part? Maybe there was one part of the field that got flooded out early, so we had a lower yield in that area. So some of it is easily explained. Other areas, we can use this data to dive deeper and see if it's something we can remedy for the next year. Another blocko, just because it's, you know, it's fun, right? The things science can do. Another piece here, so you see that map up in the top right. We use maps like this to show us everything from soil components throughout the field to yield components. So these can be used on a very wide variety. Just wanted to give you another version of what that may look like. So why would we use this? We can match that trait or plant population with the needs of the field or the needs of that type of soil. So if you've ever seen, anybody ever looked at a soil map?
Yeah, we have.
Okay. So what do you notice about soil maps?
Different colors.
And a lot of different types of soil all right beside each other, right?
Yeah.
So where part of the field may be in Canfield silt loam, the other's a Berkeley series, or whatever the case may be, and they're right beside each other. And those two different soil types may have very different traits or characteristics that we could work within. Or we may be looking at a grass waterway, that little green kind of curve throughout there where we don't want to plant there. That's staying grass on purpose. The planter knows to turn off and turn back on once we pass that. If we use that prescription planting. We can also use different hybrids or variable rate seeding depending on the area of the field, which can be very helpful in some cases. Now, you're not going to see autonomous tractors everywhere you look right away, but it is a variety of tractor that's available now. So this was actually highlighted at Farm Science Review just a few years ago. So there are fully autonomous tractors, and the US accounts for about 35% of global autonomous tractor usage. Now, like I said, this isn't something we're necessarily going to see in our backyards in this area. Where would something like this with a large implement make the most sense?
Well, where there's like thousands of acres.
Big, expansive crop areas. We joke here, we may farm the same acreage, but our plots are little irregularly shaped 5-acre, 10-acre patches in some cases, which would drive maybe someone out in Western Ohio nuts. We don't necessarily have the spanse and area that makes these make sense here in most cases, but it is a technology that's available and being utilized.
Do they use that in Western Ohio? Or is it mostly
there
out
may be
west,
some.
where there's larger ranches and...
I've talked with a grower or two that's dabbled in it,
Yeah.
But it's kind of hit and miss. It's
Still
still
new.
new. There's still, think of the new iPhones when they come out. There's some glitches that have to be worked out, okay? So any new technology has the potential for that. Now, that said, there may be folks that have been using these in addition to more traditional routes. And that gives us kind of a look at what works best. And you know, looking at it from the time and labor standpoint, if I can map this out and be keeping an eye on this tractor with my iPad over in this field while I'm working in another field, my output just doubled. Now, that's not to say that these are, you know, there's a cost associated with them. There's still maintenance. You still have to be managing it, but you know,
Could anybody drive that at any point, or is it? I mean, I don't even know.
So a lot of these would be, and I am no expert in autonomous tractor or autonomous equipment. A lot of this we're controlling with a screen.
Oh, yeah, I should know
So we're controlling a lot of this with a screen. Okay, so we talked about crop equipment a little bit. Let's talk farm and ranch. So ranch equipment. Okay, someone mentioned barbed wire a little while ago. Okay, that was one of the staples of fencing for a long time. Still is. If you go to Tractor Supply, you see Red Brand Fencing. Okay, that is not a new fencing company. They've been around a long time. Back in the late 1880s, Peter Summer from Illinois created that woven wire fencing. Okay, that's still what a lot of folks use today.
Yeah.
It's still used very heavily. Still known as Red Brand Fence. Okay, ranch equipment now, we still have barbed wire, we still have woven wire, okay? But we also have a few other pieces that are available at our usage. So the high tensile fence, this is made of a higher carbon steel, okay? It's designed to last a little longer. It's a fence that you can tighten over time. Supposed to reduce that loosening piece, okay? So we're not out. I grew up with woven wire and barbed wire fence.
Yeah,
It's a real fun day when you got to go out and tighten that and go down the whole line. So high tensile, we're seeing an increased usage of. If you drive around, you'll see it. Movable fences or temporary fences are also used pretty commonly, especially as a, maybe not as a perimeter fence all the time, but as a breakup for the lots inside. So in this case, think about a rotational grazing system. If we don't want to have 16 different squared off rectangle lots within our overall pasture permanently, we can use movable fence. Move it every day, let the cattle access a little bit more pasture each time, or whether it's sheep or goats, whatever you're grazing. So movable fence comes in very handy. Now, this is one of the more, I'll call it a Cadillac version of the movable fence, like a reel or a Gallagher reel. There's a lot of fencing companies out with similar technologies. As you walk, it pulls out, the fence posts automatically kind of set out, doesn't get wound up and in knots, which is wonderful. But we also have the single strand poly wire that we can run through just some regular fence posts or some step-in posts. So we've gotten more practical and flexible with our fencing, thinking about how do we graze more efficiently, and is expecting folks to build 5 to 8 strand barbed wire fences to break up every lot. Is that practical? No. So how can we make it more practical and usable? Now, I know this is of the future, but it's now. So virtual fencing is also something that we're learning more about and that more producers are trying out, piloting, or using in different spaces. So where we used to have, old Bessie out with a cowbell on, now think of Bessie with a GPS collar on. Okay? So we have this for dogs, right?
Oh, it's that same thing.
Think it's the same concept, right? So we can set a fence for dogs on our phone. My brother-in-law uses it for his, actually. It tells that collar exactly where her boundaries are. This is a very similar concept just for cows, okay? So now, with some of these technologies, we can also track different physiological traits, that cow, okay? We can track her temperature, her rumination. Some of these will also give us some health alerts, like, hey, her temperature is spiked, we haven't seen her ruminating as much. Maybe she's one we need to look at more heavily. Now, where this came in handy, and I was in a conference just a couple years ago, last fall, speaking with a colleague out west, think of where they had wildfires, okay? A lot of ranchers' fences were either destroyed, either partially or totally throughout those fires, but you still have to manage cattle somehow. So there was a pilot program using one of these virtual fencing aids that actually helped them keep the cattle contained until they were able to rebuild. Now, cows and heifers, or our females, tend to respond to the collars much better than our bulls, okay? So some of these collars use a little bit of a auditory or a vibration technology to let the cattle know, okay, you're reaching, similar to the dog collar, okay, you're reaching your boundary, time to turn around. Bulls, think of their big muscular necks, okay? They tend to not care and walk through. So that's, you know, something that is still being worked through. It may not be only method of containment for bulls. You may still need that permanent fixture there. And some respect it. That's not to say that that's across the board, but they're a little more bullheaded, for lack of a better term, and can...
Appropriate word.
Yes. Now, so that's some of our production livestock equipment. Now think of our dairy equipment, okay? The hygienic glove milker was created back in 1879 by Anna Baldwin in New Jersey. And that really changed how dairy farms functioned and how they would look at milk production for years to come. By 1922, really not that far later, okay, from 1879 to 1922, they created a pulsating vacuum, and that was hung under the cow using a strap. Think about how similar that looks in principle to a lot of our milking operations today, right? Very similar. We've come a long way. So today, we have the more traditional parlor or setup like we see, like with a pit, and cows are standing kind of, you know, eye level, still with the pulsating milker and the suction. A herringbone parlor is one of the most common designs in the US, so cattle are standing at a 45-degree angle, kind of just angled in, so you've got access to the udder from the side, not the back. Now, a rotary parlor is one that, I don't know if you've ever seen a rotary parlor. So think of the cattle are essentially on a carousel. It's constantly moving. So you have access from directly behind. Cattle are coming on in one area. See, you can kind of see over in the corner there. They're coming on. They know to step into the parlor or into the rotary. They're slowly moving. So as they're moving, we have workers that are behind the cattle, wiping teats, stripping out, putting the milker on. By the time she's made her appropriate rotations and she's milked out, the milker comes off just like it would in a herringbone parlor, and she can back out and go on about her day. So
She had a little ride.
yeah, and now you notice the cattle all have collars. So that's their form of ID, and those are also used with the rotary. But we also have robots.
Cows are very much creatures of habit, and if they come to the robot, they get a comfortable milking process. Why not come back? And when we look at box robots, and that's why I think Lely has a distinct advantage, is that a box robot allows us to be where the cow wants to be, not where we want the cow to go to. So we allow the cow to be close to the robot, be close to the feed, close to the water, and close to that comfortable bed, all in a very close proximity. One of the things that just convinced me of the value of a Lely robot was a dairy I was at, had been in robots for a while, and were good managers, allowed the cows to do what the cows wanted to do. We were sitting in the observation deck watching the cows, and I noticed the cow prop her head up, look over at the robot, and put her head back down. And it seemed odd to me until I noticed there was 2 cows standing outside the robot waiting to be milked. We chatted for a while. Half hour later, the cow did the same thing, and now there was no cows in front of the robot. She got up and walked over. So she had learned, why waste my time standing in line? There'll be an opportunity later. So the cow can come and go as it pleases. The cow can get milked when it pleases. The cow can eat when it pleases. It allows the cow to truly find comfort. When we talk about cow comfort in other facilities, it's bed design or access to waters. Here, it's the entire day of the cow's life cycle. She can do what she wants to do at her own free choosing. And that's what I mean by cow comfort with a robot.
So the robots, so you see there, they have sensors and lasers that actually look for the teat placement. They'll wash, make sure that they're counting for any bacterial levels. We're getting more information even from the robot than we typically can just by hand normally. Now that's not to say that these are cheap. So there's still a cost associated with them, but a lot of our farms that have switched over to robots have looked at that cost analysis where, okay, it's gonna cost me this value in labor over the next how many years. where if I put a robot in, am I going to see an increase in output, and how long will that take for it to pay for itself? So there is a little bit of that cost comparison and analysis conversation that happens, but just locally we have quite a few robotic users and they've seen great success. That doesn't mean it works for every farm. There's a lot of different considerations that come into play beyond cost. Whether the facility can manage something like this, whether it works for the cow layout and whatnot. But this is another tool that our dairy producers have in their toolbox. A couple other robotic on-farm laborers. We have a robotic feed pusher on the left there. So people are like, why do we need a robot to push up feed? Okay. Well, how do cows produce milk? They eat. Dairy cows eat a lot more than people realize. So having food constantly available, or that TMR constantly available where they can reach it, prevents spoilage, right? Sure. Because if feed is just enough out of reach that the cows are, I'm not gonna worry about that now, and it sits out for too long, it's not as enticing when we push it up later. So we're making sure we have fresh feed in front of them at all times. This is also taking away a person that needs to be shoveling up the feed throughout the day. It's freeing that person up to do something else. Robotic manure scraper. People chuckle, but it's a very real thing, all right? So,
I had one when I had my horses.
well, yeah, it would have made the job much quicker, right? So while we may also see folks, we scrape out barns using skid steers or whatnot, that's still a very normal practice. But this is also something that folks can use. And this brings the manure through and into the pit or the holding area at regular time periods throughout the day, and it keeps a more clean atmosphere. Now, you heard him talk about cow comfort and mattresses. So they actually do make mattresses for the bedding as well. So that's not something that every dairy is going to have the same bedding, no. Some folks use kind of a water-based mattress. Others use sand. Because it's more hygienic, or sawdust. There's a lot of bedding options, but when we choose beddings, it's based on cow comfort, maximizing cleanliness, and the overall use and cost. With the beds like they are, whether it's sand, we can go through and scrape out. As we're moving cattle into the parlor, we can go through with a scraper and bring manure piles off the bed into the alley where they'll be scraped down. Straw gets a little bit more clunky, okay? Now, if it's a pen pack situation, so say a large pen, say maybe our heifers, dry cows, or beef cattle, or sheep, goats, whatever the case may be in a pen pack, we still see a lot of straw usage, absolutely. So that is a very broad scoping view of what agriculture technology could look like. I know I am not touching on everything by a long shot. We'd be here for hours. These are just kind of highlighting the largest production areas that we have in this area. Now, if we look at Ohio as a whole, some of the top ag products in Ohio are agronomic crops like soybeans and corn, dairy products and milk. We've got hogs, cattle, chicken, and eggs. Our greenhouse industry is quite large. And then we also have all the way down through our wheat, broilers, poultry, and forest products. Okay, in terms of national production, we have about 76,000 farms in Ohio, encompassing about 13 million acres. 95% of those are family owned and operated. So by and large, most farms across the US and across Ohio are primarily family owned. Nationally, Ohio ranks #1 in Swiss cheese production, #2 in egg production, and #5 in soybean production. So we do a pretty bang up job on those three commodities by and large. Soybeans do happen to be our top exported crop, and we also, in case you needed a reason to visit one of our local wineries, we are among the top 10 states in the nation for wine production, with over 425 licensed wine manufacturers. We actually have a viticulture specialty team, and we have a research station now up in Ashtabula County that is very focused and geared toward viticulture and winemaking. So little fun things that you may not have known about Ohio that, go support those industries because they are very successful. So the future of Ohio agriculture, we're going to keep seeing that change and adopting new technologies. Okay, that's how we stay on the cutting edge. We're going to continue researching those technologies and their use and their practicality, okay, through Extension and through the College of Ag. That's That's one of the most fun things we get to do is see, okay, this is new, does it work? And if it does work, how does it work best? And how do we help our farms either adopt or become more efficient with their use? I would be remiss if I didn't include Brutus Buckeye in here. And we always come back to that ultimate conversation of how do we keep feeding the future or feeding the population that's growing while our number of farms and number of farmers isn't. We have a pretty fixed number of acres that we can produce on, a fixed water source, and we have a decreasing number of farmers. So how do we become more efficient with the 2% of the population that feeds the remaining 98? We always hear that feeding 9 billion by 2050. That's a very real conversation and a topic that we talk about in the ag research world a lot. Not only feeding people, but making sure is what they're eating nutrient dense, is what they're eating truly healthy, and providing them the nutrients they need. So how does that happen? Well, one, through research that happens on a lab setting, on an on-farm setting. A lot of different avenues work together to make that research happen. Continuing to improve efficiency. So the photo I showed down on the bottom right there, that's from Farm Science Review. So Ohio State hosts one of the largest farm shows in the country every September over in London, Ohio at the Molly Caron Ag Center. And one of the things that we highlight is ongoing research trials, successes, drawbacks, trials, errors, and we share those with our farms and the industry members that attend. Not to just say, here's this fun research project we did, but to say, here's exactly how this translates to on-farm use. Tying into this, if we look back in 1960, on average, a US farmer fed about 26 people. Today, a farmer feeds over 155. So we've grown in efficiency, which is great. We've seen where we're like, oh wow, we did this for years just because that was the way we always did it, but it wasn't necessarily the best way we could do it. So increasing that efficiency has been really a large piece of that puzzle. We're also breeding more adaptable crops. So where we hear of hybrids or genetic use, okay, that's where that conversation comes into play. How can we create crops and plants that are more healthful for our populations, especially those that, think of the Arctic apple. Anybody familiar with the Arctic apple? Okay, it's an apple variety that was bred to be shelf stable for a longer period of time before it started browning, which here we're thinking, okay, we could put it in a fridge, but what about areas that don't have reliable refrigeration? Okay, or we have vitamin A fortified rice. One of the recurring issues that was being noticed years ago in areas that relied heavily on rice as a large part of their diet was vitamin A deficiencies. That vitamin A wasn't coming in through traditional sources that we would consider normal parts of our diet. So breeding a rice that was more vitamin A fortified helped bridge that gap. Okay, we're not necessarily asking folks to change their diet or change their culture. Let's make it work for you better, okay? There's a lot of those technologies out there that we're trying to constantly renew and update so that we're feeding people in a more meaningful way. So we have to talk a little bit about the agricultural economy and where that plays in, right? So economy-wise, if we look at ag, food, and related industries, okay, that contributes about 1.2 trillion to US gross domestic product. So agriculture is a large booming economy. We contribute a lot to that national scale. I know part of the middle got cut off there, but if you look at the 2023 employment pie graph, we made up about 22 million jobs, which is about 10.5% of US employment rates. If we look at the value added, that's over on your graph on the right. Again, I'm not going to go too far in depth on these, but just to give you kind of the quick pie in the sky look of the revenue that's generated. And we calculate this down to a county level. Any questions about ag, past, present, or future?
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize extension added a community component.
So we don't have a community development educator in all 88 counties, but we do rely on our folks pretty consistently to help us think through different development tactics, you know, how do we bring in more economic resources and developments? So a very crucial piece of the extension puzzle.
So. Yeah.
But thanks so much for having us. This was fun.
Thank you. I so appreciate you coming out.
Hey, no problem. We enjoyed this.
Wonderful.